Hello and welcome to InnerMedia. I'm Josh Karam, and with us, as always, is Ted Karam.
Hey guys.
Now today we're going to be talking about an old TV show called Kung Fu. We want to just dissect a lot of spiritual wisdom from the shows and talk about it, because that's what we do in InnerMedia.
We
talk
love
about
it. I mean, there's a lot of wisdom in these.
Definitely, and we talked about like Kung Fu Panda earlier, and we were mentioning all these different Kung Fu films.
Where did the name Po come from?
I was about to say we gotta go back and figure out where Master Po came from,
that's right.
which came from the Kung Fu series in the 1970s. So funny enough, this episode has Master Po leading Grasshopper around. So we're going to be talking about Master Po in this episode as well. First off, spoiler alert. If you want to see this show, we're going to be talking about the plot, because this show is a lot about Kane goes through and helps these people, and really the story of the show every time is the spiritual wisdom.
Yeah,
so
there's a lot.
Spoiler alert, this is, I think, Season 1, Episode 12. If you want to see the episode Superstition of Kung Fu, go check that out first. Now we can get a little more into it. So the quote that I want to make our big Master Wizard Jedi thing here is when Poe says the Roosevelt quote, the only thing to fear is fear itself. So that's going to come up a lot throughout this episode, because when you hear superstition, that has a lot to do with fear.
Superstition.
So, Kwai Chang Caine is a Shaolin priest who was banished to the U.S. because he killed the emperor in defense of his master.
Yeah.
Not really important in this case, but that's just why he's in the States. He wanders around and helps people. Mm-hmm. In this case, he wanders into this town where these people put him in prison for no reason, but Kane just goes with the flow.
That's very typical.
That's Kane. Yeah, exactly. He doesn't fight things. He accepts where he is. Yeah. And he comes to this mining prison where, first off, these people are treated unfairly, completely. They're wrongfully accused of crime and thrown into these mining prisons for silver. And they're also on a Native American burial site, they say. So there's this huge superstition with it as well, that the bones haunt these mines, and there's been a couple deaths in the future, or
if you
sorry,
dig
in the
up
past.
the bones, right?
Yeah,
you're cursed.
You're cursed, and you
curse.
will die.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a voodoo kind of curse.
And that goes into, I think that goes into the first part, right? So the episode always will flash back between what Kane was learning in the temple that relates to what's going on in the episode currently.
That's what we love.
So the young Kane is talking to Master Po, where, hey, that's where Po the Panda is, and he's afraid of this corridor in the temple.
Yeah. It's
a dark corridor, and there's so much unknown with it, and he's like, I'm afraid, Master. It's dark in there, and Master Po then responds with, is it not also dark in your room?
At night, yeah.
And I think this is interesting, because even though this is a child fear, there's all these older people that are also afraid of the quote-unquote darkness.
Right. Adult, child, it's all the same, ultimately. So what's interesting is Poe saying here, Grasshopper saying, but it's dark in there. That sealed off corridor, it's locked up and it's dark, and what's in there? And so it's frightening. But that's what happens to all of us. It's not so much the darkness, it's the unknown in the darkness. We don't know what's there. It's kind of like, well, it's dark outside over there in the woods and we're all afraid it's night, but if the sun comes up, oh, it's a beautiful woods, So the bottom line is we fear what we don't understand. We fear the unknown. We fear that which is beyond our comprehension. And this ties very nicely into the whole concept of superstition, right? Because we develop superstitions about the larger part of life, the more energetic part of life. It becomes mystical, it becomes magical. And then as we perceive that aspect of ourselves, of existence, from the lens of separation, we fear that which we don't know. And that's what we end up projecting upon this larger dimension of life. I would think, Josh, everyone to some degree probably believes at some level that life is a mystery, and life is the ultimate mystery, right? And that there's more to it than meets the eye, and we've talked about that, right? And that there's this energetic part of things that we have influence over, right? So we talk about the power of intention, or the power of prayer, or the power of magic and charms, right? We talk get in the Harry Potterish realms of magic, and is any of that true, or is that just airy fairy mumbo jumbo? When we begin to have experiences in life that show us there is a dimension that is not is beyond the physical. We call it maybe the spiritual, the soul, the spirit, the superconscious mind, higher consciousness. We get into realms where the whole principle of this show really helps to illuminate something, and that is the superstitions we have are really our beliefs.
Yeah.
They're the things that we believe that are not necessarily true about the bigger picture of life and our relationship to it. And so foundational in it all is this concept, this principle of fear. What is fear? If we break it down, I love the acronym, false evidence that appears real. Why does it appear real? Because there's a lack of light. Basically, shadows without substance we begin to think are real only when there's the absence of light in our mind and in our heart. So when we're hiding our own light, when we're not connected with the whole of our being, when we're not unified with the light of truth within ourselves, then we project images of darkness, images of fear. And what happens is that becomes the chains, the prison that hold us back in life.
Another thing within this prison is the ward of the prison throws the prisoners that don't agree into this iron hut or this iron box, and basically because of where it is located, the heat in the daytime makes it unbearably hot, and the nighttime makes it unbearably cold to live in. So it's torture for these prisoners. And Cain and this other prisoner, Medor, which I'm reading right here because I could not remember his name for the life of me. Yeah, exactly. They get thrown into this oven. Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. It's the oven.
The oven, right? Because it heats up so much in the desert in the day, like you said, and it gets so cold at night.
Cain is completely not bothered by this, but he does say he feels the cold. Like, he tells Medor he's man. It's not like he doesn't feel these things.
Right, he feels it.
And Medor's really struggling. He's freezing in the night, and he's barely able to survive
during the heat of the
incredible
day.
heat. And Cain sees this, and he wants to offer him help, because that's what Cain does. Mm-hmm. Cain helps people in need, and he the first thing that I find so interesting that he asks for his complete trust.
Right.
In this, which I'm intrigued. Why is it just that he needs to fall into the belief of this? But the thing that he asks him is that, would you believe me if I tell you, you are not within a prison. The prison is within you.
Ah, that's a great one.
Yeah, yes. So you get into this scene.
Yeah. So this is great, Josh. So again, Cain, like you said, he asks, do you trust me completely? Which means just let go of all your past beliefs, your past superstitions, your past ideas about who and what you think you are, and just listen to my voice. Okay, so that's the inner you. That's the real you, the divine in you, the spark of God in you that says, do you trust me? Basically, me being the light, the truth, so that you can be free of the delusion of the shadows of separation, lack, and limitation. So he says, he just kind of surrenders. He doesn't have a choice, right? At this point, he's just letting go. And so Cain begins to guide him beyond who he thinks he is, beyond his reactive conditioning, to find the peace of the present moment. So first, remember, he says something like, let all effort go.
Yeah.
Don't try and struggle against this. In other words, surrender. Don't try and struggle against what is at the moment. Befriend it. Wow, really? Befriend it? We're in an oven. We're going to die. Yeah, befriend it, whatever it is. In other words, as if you invited it into your existence in this moment. So what does that do? It allows them to release all resistance. Release all resistance. So now all of a sudden there's no more effort in trying to push against anything. When we do that, it just pushes back.
Yeah.
We let go, we become still, we become present. Now there's let all heat, let all effort flow from your body, let all heat flow from your body, until you just become weightless. You become present, and your body becomes one with your spirit, he says, which is the unification Remember, in the present moment, we always have talked about this, where we go from an individual, just a water drop, to the whole ocean, where we become just so present, so still, just allowing everything to be. There's such a power in your allowing everything to be just the way that it is, because when you do that, you allow yourself to be just the way that you are, and your true self emerges. And that's that deeper part of him, where he becomes so still, so present. He empties himself. This is the practice of a beginner's mind, just being empty, just being witnessing reality, just being a witnessing presence. Yeah, there's the heat, but you're just witnessing it. You're not the one suffering. You're not the who that this is happening to. You're the what. That's the background that's observing it. So in that comes the freedom, and then he becomes one with spirit in this moment. He unifies with the whole of life, which is as light as a feather, a breath, nothing at all. He becomes nothing at all. Now he's gone.
Yeah.
There's no more him. There's no more personality to suffer. There's no more separate entity to be dying or be in agony. There's just a witnessing presence. And this is so beautiful, because we're all suffering in life to some degree, right? Where there's pain, there's suffering, there's lack, there's limitation. Why? Because in the world, this is the world of limitation. Symbols are all limited. So this is the world. But when we can sink down, when we can still, remember, as opposed to just knowing ourselves as that little wave upon the surface of the ocean, when we can sink down into the present moment and be still, we unite with the whole of the ocean. We become one with all. And there's always a sense of peace there. It's not that we find peace. It's not that we create stillness. We realize we're already still. We're already whole. We're already at peace. We're already in a state of grace at our very foundation. It's always there. So when you're going through today, this is so important. When you're going through today and you're suffering, there's pain, there's agony, it may just be mental. That mental does what? It turns into emotional, right? Because as we think, so do we feel. That the energy that we set into motion with our thoughts becomes the emotion, the energy, the feelings that come to us. And then it may be even so profound that we're broadcasting it so much. Remember, as we sow, so shall we reap. The energy we send out is what comes back to us in the mirror of life. It may actually be affecting our whole world, right? Our experience of the world. So instead of waiting for the world to change, instead of wanting that person to change so that you can feel good, wanting this situation to change so that you can feel happy, you can take away everything. These guys, this is amazing, right? You can imagine you're in a little box, just like this oven, and there's nothing you can change outside right now. They couldn't change the outer circumstances, but they always have the power, and so do you, to change how you relate to that in your mind. And when you change that, everything changes.
Definitely. And for him as well, Midor, a guy who's been beaten up all his life, who's been captured in a prison, like his life was nothing, and then realizing the power of what he had within him.
Right.
And to the rest of the people, especially the ward, when they're released from the oven, they're in shock that they can actually stand up and just walk out.
They don't have to drag them out, right?
Yeah, they're unaffected.
Because they freed themselves from the prison of their own mind.
Yeah.
That's true freedom. And there's nothing, and that's the ultimate prison. There is no prison except a prison in our own mind.
Yeah.
There is no ultimate oppression or problem, or we are the ones that are holding back our own light. And when we withhold our own light, that's what keeps us bound in the prison of our own fear, of our own belief in separation, lack, and limitation. And as we believe, so we project, so we broadcast, and so we perceive. In other words, we walk into and we live into our beliefs.
And also, it took Cain a while to get to this point. Young Cain, as we flash back, is still struggling with his fear of the dark, that dark corridor within the room. So Poe has a test for him that he claims that all the students must pass.
This is great.
He shows him this balance beam. And he's like, walk across this balance beam. And he's like, good, keep practicing. And he says, I will then ask you to walk across a pool of acid.
He tells him what's in the dark
yes.
corridor.
Yes, and that is, yes, exactly. That is what in the dark, that is what is in the dark. It is a pool of acid that is in the dark corridor. And all these students of the Shaolin Temple must cross this beam.
Yep.
And if they don't, they fall in. Poe tells them that it is acid, and you will die if you fall within the pool of acid. The thing that Poe tells him is that balance is essential, right? It is always essential to keep one's balance. Yes. Yep. And
harmony within you.
The thing that I forgot that he says in it too is that Kane's like, what if I fall? And he says, I guarantee you will be okay. Or something along those lines. It's not about falling in. He just says, oh, you'll be fine.
Yeah, you won't fall.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Not even fall. You will be okay.
You will be okay.
Because there's nothing to fear.
And fear itself.
Should we get to the end of this storyline, or should we jump back and discuss what just happened there? Because I don't know if we want to talk about what happens when he crosses the beam.
Let's go ahead. Yeah.
Let's do it. It's time for him to cross the beam. He's the practice beam, the one that's right above the dirt. He has crossed many, many times. He comes to this pool of acid. Finally, there's a skeleton at the bottom of the pool. It's bubbling. This heat is coming from it. Master Poe, who is blind, by the way, for those of you who haven't seen the show, he crosses the beam no problem at all. And then Kane is really nervous to cross it. He's hesitating, but Poe's reminding him, just focus on the beam, and you won't fall. And you won't fall. Yeah. But Kane gets about a couple feet in and falls into the pool. Then Master Poe begins to laugh, and Kane comes out of the pool completely unharmed.
Yeah,
and
it's just warm water.
Because it's just warm water. Yeah. And Poe shows that the skeleton at the bottom of it's just this image of a skeleton on some piece of plastic. That's all it is. There was nothing.
There was nothing ever real about it.
Exactly.
The fear was all in his mind.
Yeah, and then there's a quote at the very end that Poe tells him. Poe is he's having fun with this, and he tells Kane that superstition is like a magnet. It pulls you in the direction of your belief. And Kane thought in the dark corridor it would spell doom, and the pool of acid spells death.
He was drawn to it.
Yes, exactly.
He was drawn to it. So this is...
I mean, how could he keep balance, right, if he's drawn to the pool of acid?
This is so important. This is what's so great about this little story, this little clip of the film, right? We're all confronted with things we fear. It's just the way of life. Why? Because we're all confronted with the unknown. And why? Because we're infinite beings, and there'll always be unknown that we're expanding into. So no matter where we are in the path of life, in the path of self-discovery, in the path of revealing our true selves, we're always going to bump into something that's unknown for us. And so it's great because Master Poe says, all right, practice walking on the beam. And Kane walks back, Grasshopper walks on the beam back and forth, no problem, right? Because the room is lit, everything's familiar, it's all fine. But now go ahead and put that beam over some bubbling water that looks like acid, and he thinks, now the fear comes up in his mind, right? Now the fear comes up in his heart and in his body as he's thinking about falling into the acid and dying, being killed, right? So and as you said, Master Poe says, focus only on the beam, Grasshopper, and then you won't fall. You'll be okay, right? What does that mean? That means focus on the desired results. Focus on that it's already done. Can you go there and walk in that feeling? Live in that vibration. It's all the good your heart desires already is. This is the quantum model of reality. Infinite possibilities of divine good already exist. Where? Here, when, now. Can we tune into them? It's very difficult if we're separate. It's because what happens is the fear works on us. The darkness in our mind works on us, and what do? We fear the worst.
Yeah.
Right? That's the ego. The ego's job is to protect us. The ego says, well, protect you. And so what happens when we get lost in that vibration, reactivity takes over, right? What happens, we've talked about this before, when our buttons get pushed, a program takes over, fear goes up, what happens to intelligence? It falls down, right? Why? Because a reactive mind just reacts according with the programming of the past. So now that Grasshopper, he practiced, any athlete knows this, right? You practice and you practice, but then you've got to let it all go. You can't be thinking anymore when you're performing. You can't be, when it comes the moment and you have to walk the beam, or you have to get on stage, or you have to perform your sport, whatever it is, or your task, whatever is before you, however you're performing on the stage of life, you let it all go.
Yeah.
And you allow that conditioning to just take over, which will have you just walking across the beam. But if you're in your mind, if you're thinking about it, fearing about it, worrying about it, then what happens is your reactivity takes over. And it brings forth what is that? The reactivity is coming out of fear, so it's restrictive. It's holding back your natural life force. It's holding back your energy, and you're now stumbling over your own self. Now you're getting in your own way.
Yeah.
Okay, so a non-reactive mind leads to a non-reactive body. Leads to a body that just flows with the force, Luke. Feel the force. Just I'm getting into Luke Skywalker, but just naturally allows you to bring the best of who you are in this moment. But if we're stuck in our mind, if we're fearing, remember, as you said, this is a beautiful quote from Master Post. Superstition is like a magnet. It pulls you, it draws you in the direction of your belief. Now, if your superstition is positive, remember, superstition is belief. If your belief is positive, it draws you to that positive outcome. If your belief is negative, it draws you to that negative outcome. In other words, it becomes self-fulfilling. Henry Ford said, whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you're right either way. It's you who determine it in your own mind. And so that's the power of belief. So remember, we hear in the words that are being said what we already believe to be true. We see, we filter, and we see in reality what we believe to be true. So this is where our superstition comes in, and we get to be right. He believed he would fall.
Yeah.
And he gets to be right. But why? Because the mirror of life shows us a reflection of our own energy, shows us a reflection of what we're sending out. As we sow, so shall we reap. And this is really powerful because we're all living in all kinds of superstitions, all kinds of beliefs that are not true. We've talked about this over and over again. When you hyphenate the word belief, be a lie. We're being a lie in so many ways that hold ourselves back from being who we want to be and giving what we want to give in life.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because this is Cain's journey with overcoming his fear and not to fall into negative superstition. Now, after they come out of the hut in the present moment of the show, there's someone who actually finds one of the bones from the gravesite and dies immediately after it, and the people working are scared. And also, the people controlling the prison camp are also scared because they're like, this man has no fear.
Right.
And we can't
How do we
control
him.
And that goes back to, like, the age-old discussion of do you rule with love or do you rule with fear? And, of course, when people use medieval example to think you rule with fear to have success, which is untrue. But, so the ward's like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to set Cain up. He'll find a bone that we plant, and then we're going to take the mind down on him. Yeah. But when the ward does it, it takes the mind down on everybody. So him, a bunch of the people in the camp, and Cain are trapped within the mind. And a lot of them do action, right? They react immediately, and they're like, we need to dig out. We have to do something. Right. Yeah. Or even we have to kill the ward because he trapped us in here. And Cain said, and Cain's like, we can't do this. We have to just save the air in the cave.
For all of us.
And just breathe.
Yeah.
And there's a couple things. I think it's interesting because Midor, he sees what Cain has taught him and realizes, I have to follow him because he's right.
Right.
Yeah, like, taking that action is incorrect, so just doing that.
Normally, normally we want to we react out of our conditioning.
Yeah.
right? But when we can pause, be still. And again, Cain is leading that guy and the whole group now in a very similar thing as when they were in the oven together. And that is, can you pause first? Okay, yeah, that person's upsetting you. Okay, yeah, that's you're taking offense to that, or you want to defend yourself. Can you first unite with the moment? Can you first be still? Don't react. Don't react like a puppet on a string and just let your reactive conditioning rule you. Can you pause? Can you stay present? This is all about presence. This whole episode. Can you be still in yourself and now respond? Now respond in unity with the whole of life. Now respond with love and understanding and compassion, with a giving heart, as opposed to in defense and attacking in defense because you feel hurt, because you feel threatened. Unify with the whole of life because now there's nothing separate from you, nothing apart from you that could possibly threaten you. It's so profound. I mean, the simplest thing here. Yeah. And now he's teaching them, let's be still, enter this moment, and this will save the physical air that we're breathing, right? The oxygen that's in the chamber. So this is so powerful, such a powerful message. Not just when we're with one person, but when we're with a whole group of people. Wherever you find yourself in life, can you be the witnessing presence? Can you bring a sense of spaciousness to the situation, non-reactivity to the situation? In which the right answer, a solution can emerge all on its own. Yeah.
Perhaps it would be better to remain still and free the mind from fear. That is the exact thing of Cain. Because the interesting thing is Cain has the belief then to share with them of that the people on the other side will come for them. Which is interesting because that is a positive superstition, as you said.
Right.
Because he believes that they will come and save them. So they don't. They just need to wait.
They just need to wait. And so that wisdom right there, perhaps it's better to be still and free our minds from fear than just reacting. That's always the case. And that's what brings the best in us forth. That's what brings the real you forth, that energy. That because you stay connected with the whole of life. What is fear? Fear just shows up, that false evidence that appears real when we're polarized in life, when we're pushing and pulling on what is. Grasshopper is such a great example of always people judging him unfairly, always people trying to do injustice to him, but he's immediately what? He's always non-reactive. He's always present. He's always here. It's such a great example. And so then, because of that, he remains unified with the whole of life, unified with divine presence, unified with the answers and the solutions that come out of oneness with all that is. And now he can be an instrument for that. Now he can bring that forward. Superstition, as we talked about before, is sensing this larger dimension of life, this energy, the mystical. Yeah. But seeing it through the lens of separation, through polarity. So what we do is we project and we perceive fear. Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher, said a long time ago that being is to becoming as truth is to belief. So being transcends all becoming. Now, the light of being, the real you, your true being, that essence that's always at peace, that essence that always is whole, that transcends that which is ever becoming, the wave on the surface, the waves that are constantly just changing. Being transcends becoming as truth, the light of truth, the real you, transcends your beliefs about who you think you are. And this is the light that dawns and illumines our mind, and it frees us from the false superstitions of lack, separation, and limitation. Yeah. So that we can be the light, so that we can be the answer, bring the solution into our own lives.
Yeah. So a couple more, the last couple of quotes here to wrap this up. So as the people are coming to save them, it's interesting because the prisoners continue to dig, but the people who run the camp stop.
Yeah, they give up.
Because there's your like, is it better to live in fear with other people or better to live in this energy of love? Because those people were all about fear, fear, fear. So they fear for themselves. They're running out of there because it's over. The people who care are going to continue to dig, and there's the good belief. So Meteor goes to Cain. They're running out of air. You have the candlelight in the background to emphasize how much air that they have left.
Right.
And he says, "I'm afraid to die," and Cain says, "Then think of living." But that's hard to grasp. So he's like, "Is this the end?" And then Cain says, "Perhaps as waking is an end to sleep."
Yeah.
How? And I feel as though this is going to tie into our final quote too. It is the question of like, when you're in such a bad place, like, how is Cain able to think of things? I mean, even with a lack of the physical essence of air, which is the essential to life.
For life.
Even without that,
yes. Because he's connected with the life eternal. Because he's connected with... See, we don't have a life that we can keep or lose. We think we do. We're born and then we die. We think birth and death happen to life.
Yeah.
But birth and death happen in life, not to life. Remember, there's so much more to life than meets the eye. There's so much more to reality than these little filters, these little senses translate. It's more than the physical show here. There's a greater dimension to what we are. We are life itself. And when we stay present in the moment, we stay connected with true being, which is life, the eternal nature of life. And so that's where the answers come from. That's where the wisdom comes from. That's where the intelligence, the solution comes from. That can't possibly come from the rational, logical thinking mind based on what's happened in the past because it's unprecedented. It comes from something beyond this world. And as he stays in connection with that, in harmony with that, it flows, that light, that energy emerges through him. And as he says, perhaps as waking is an end to sleep. Right? It's a great metaphor for life in general here. We think in death, as we go through the death experience, that's the end of life. But we find it's not the end of life. That life continues forever. And that death is a doorway we pass through into another dimension of life. Now, some people will see people like dead relatives and say, I had this, and we think they're crazy, or we think they're insane. But are they really? Or are they tuning into a dimension of reality that normally these senses don't translate?
Yeah.
And experiencing the transcendent. And how do we know? Well, we each make the decision for ourselves. We each find that balance. One foot in the energetic world, one foot in the physical world, finding our balance. As Master Po said in this episode, it's always so important to find one's balance.
Yeah.
Be it harmony within oneself. Because as you're in harmony within oneself, that's what you begin to project. That's what bounces off the mirror. And that's what you experience and see in life. So at the end here, it's so powerful, right? Because every ending is a new beginning.
Yeah.
It is an awakening to a greater sense of self. So the guy says in the end, right?
I was about to say, yeah, this really is just the way to take it home, where he's like, where Cain said, what are you going to do now that you're free? And he says, well, I've been dying a little day by day. Any suggestions? And Cain just says, live. And that's the end of the episode right there. That's the perfect end, because it's that simple, right? This whole thing, he's been learning to think of what he wants in the end, right? So live. That's all you got to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you know what that reminds me of, Josh?
It's soul.
Soul.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's literally that's
Joe,
in
right?
the soul.
Live.
Yeah.
I'm going to live every moment of my life.
Yeah.
It's not so much, as Joe learned in the movie Soul, right, that we did a while ago, it's not so much what we do. Like, he thought it was playing the piano because that's what is his spark. That's what made him come alive. And every one of us have passion that make us come alive, or purpose. When we're living that purpose, make us come alive. But what is it really? It's connecting with being. It's what Cain was teaching the man in the oven all about. Go beyond yourself. Let go of who you think you are. Come home in this moment and realize the truth. And that's what it means to live, to be unified with the whole of life. That's what it means to live.
Yeah.
Because now you're lit up from within. Now it doesn't matter the circumstances so much. Now you are in the miracle, the magic of life, right? With the helicopters or the sun falling off the tree, the little spot, or just being in the sunshine, just living life.
Perfect. Yeah. That's great then. Well, we did an episode of Kung Fu. This is really exciting. I'm glad we got to do it finally. Yeah. If you guys like this, make sure to like and subscribe. This is InnerMedia that you're watching currently. Check us out on YouTube. You can also go to the website, therealu.net, which is TheRealu.net. I was going to hold up the bottle again, but then I said to myself, I've done that already. It's time to just regularly put it right down here on the screen. Sign up for the newsletter, learn about everything. You can check out the book, Jumping on Water, right there on the website. But also you might say, hey, videos, I can't watch a video right now. I'm driving, right? Yeah. Well, we have the Podbean where we're going to be uploading InnerMedias too. So check that out. It's going to be very slow as they come out.
Right.
There's going to be on InnerMedia. It's going to be on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. So check that out as well. Thank you guys for watching and take care.
Thanks, everyone.